So let me start. First, let me welcome everyone. Welcome to the first Cultuurgenerator video screening. If all goes well in the future, you've seen Sita sings the blues, and I'm here with the maker of Sita sings the blues, Miss Nina Paley. Welcome.
Hello. I'm on
Hello.
a bike ride right now. This is the magic of technology.
The magic of technology, together but apart still. um, uh, I think for a lot of people, this is a quite because I think on the film, I'm a film fan, so I know City Sings the Blues. It's quite famous, but for a lot of people, it's still not. It's a new experience,
Mhm.
and it's a very unique film, which you made in a unique way, in a public domain, open source kind of way. Since then, you've also made another film, Cedar Masochism.
Mhm.
Um, is there a difference, positive changes in copyright, public domain, and open source? Do you think?
Between those two films?
Yes.
Well, I suppose the most positive thing we can say is that copyright terms have not been extended again in that period. Uh, but overall, no, the laws haven't improved. The culture's improved. Like people have gotten used to the impossibility of regulating absolutely everybody's copying of everything and anything using the internet. I mean, it was a ridiculous project to try to control people's ability to copy. And even though the laws have not improved, the culture has.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. And your tools, the way you access your tools, do you work on an open source kind of way, a public domain kind of way, or is it still very difficult?
Well, my tools, I have really wanted to use open source animation software. When I started, I was using Macromedia Flash, which is not open source. And when it was bought by Adobe, Adobe ruined it.
Yeah.
And now Adobe's abandoned it, and it's still not open. It's like they own this thing that they're not even using, and you still can't work with it, which is just heartbreaking to me because that Flash is my favorite software of all time, at least from the days before Adobe ruined it.
Yeah.
And then I had to move to some sort of new software because old software doesn't run on new machines, and I needed a newer machine to edit because everything had to be edited in 2K. So I looked for new software and really wanted to use some open source software for that, but sorry, I'm really bad with names. What is the famous open source 3D software?
Is that Blender?
Blender, right. Blender they were just starting Grease Pencil at the time. It wasn't like ready yet. I don't even know how Grease Pencil's doing. If Grease Pencil had been mature at the time, I would have focused on that, but it didn't really exist yet. So I tried some other things, and I ended up with Moho Pro. It was called Anime Studio Pro, which was also not open source, but it was cheap and had a great user community at the time. And at the time, the person that created the software was still developing it. Of course, as soon as I mastered the software, that person left, and it's, it's sort of not, the community's not what it used to be, and it's all very sad. And learning new software for me is really daunting. It took me like 2 weeks to learn Macromedia Flash and 3 years to learn Moho Pro, and I just think my brain is too fossilized at this point to easily learn new software.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame that you always have to hop from one software program to another. It's terrible.
It is terrible, and the older you get, the harder it becomes.
I have that with editing software. It's just editing software. I mean, I started with Adobe, and then Adobe started that entire subscription model, and I'm like, I couldn't afford it. It's so expensive. So I switched to Apple because then you just had a one-time deal. You just buy it for $230, you're done. And Apple is not really supporting it, so I'm now trying to learn Blender.
Mhm.
So that's option number three. But yeah, you have to move, especially if you're making art and you don't have a lot of money,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, even if you do have a lot of money, it doesn't, like, there's no security in this proprietary software. You can have a lot of money and pay this stuff, but it's still up to the company to maintain it, not the community, and then it's gone. So yeah, if I have to do this again, it is going to be Blender, but I might just give up. Like, there's always paper and pen, and I don't have to keep making movies. And yeah.
You can always go, because you also make comic strips, right?
Yeah, I mean, I used to make comic strips. Lately, I've just been doing drawings. I have this project called $100 Drawings, where people PayPal me $100, tell me 2 words, and I draw it. And they don't get any revisions. It's just $100. But the result is free culture. They can use it for anything. They can use it for advertising. They can use it as a logo for their business. But it's non-exclusive, so everybody else can use it too.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
So people who are interested, you can also do that.
Yeah, if you just go to my blog, ninapaley.com, there's a category, $100 drawings. But right now I'm not even soliciting them, because in the current crisis, I'm just thinking, what value is money going to have in a few months or years?
Yeah.
Like, it could be worthless. We don't really even know.
Yeah, that brings me to the next question, because yeah, this crisis has shifted a lot of perspectives, including art. People who said 3 months ago artists should get real jobs, between quotation marks, are now saying we need entertainment, and we need it cheap, and we need it free. So, what do you think could be? Is this could be a shift? What is your perspective?
Well, bigger shift than that. All these people are now working from home and realizing that their jobs are bullshit. There's this great book by David Graeber called Bullshit Jobs. I cannot recommend this book enough. There's actually a free PDF of it, even though you can buy the published book. Just Google Bullshit Jobs PDF and you should find it. I think it's from the Anarchist Library. Most of the work that most people do is nothing. I mean, it's work on surveillance. Like, most of the purpose of most people's jobs is just to keep them surveilled at all times. They're not actually producing anything that society needs. But obviously some jobs do, right? These are the essential jobs, which are important. But when you consider how many people go to jobs that are not essential, or have gone to jobs that aren't essential, this is a real, hopefully, wake up time where people are realizing that just how little correlation there is between money and actual value, actual contribution that people make. That's something that I understood a long time ago, doing art for a living, that what I was paid had nothing to do with the quality of the art. It had only anything to do with how much money the person had that they were willing to pay. That's it, right? And then my desire to do art, I was going to do art anyway. So I guess early on I had to free myself from this correlation between money and anything I actually did. And that was why when I got into free culture, I just went I'm just going to put it out there, and if you want to send me money, send me money. Because there's no, I shouldn't withhold this if you don't give me money. I've made it already. And it turns out that some people want to share money with artists, so it's all good.
Yeah, and by the way, you can also share it now. Half the proceeds of this film go towards you. So this is also a bit of a reminder of that. So if you think I really like this film, I want to support the artist, you can do it right here. Speaking of supporting artists, there has been a long people used to say copyright is to protect artists. And as you, I think you said in several interviews, well, there's not really a correlation between that. It's to protect corporations. And I think one of the ways you came in contact with that is when you used what you thought was public domain music.
No, I didn't think it was public domain music. That's a myth.
Oh,
I knew it
oh, the
was
myth.
public domain music.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So, well, then
Yeah.
correct it right here. Because
No,
I
I
saw.
knew it wasn't public domain music, but I had to use it.
Ah,
I mean, it was like the right music. It was the music that had to be. And so I just made my peace with it. And I started working with the intellectual property law clinic at American University to they at least found the provenance of these songs, which turned out to be owned by multiple corporations in different countries, different amounts, and some of them added up to less than 100% ownership, and some added up to more than 100% ownership. It's a real illustration of just the absurdity of corporate ownership of historical culture. If you go to sitasingstheblues.com, there's a thing called total compliance, which has the breakdown of supposedly who owns what. But anyway, I knew that they weren't public domain. I also knew that they should have been public domain by that time, legally, were it not for retroactive copyright extensions. But I knew that legally they were not in the public domain. Sorry,
okay.
I forgot.
No, it's was it to be said, was that choice worth the hassle? Because later on you tried to put it on Blu-ray and
No, I didn't try to put it on Blu-ray. No, it was totally worth it. No, that journey was amazing. I mean, the movie, like, I didn't set out to make a movie. I didn't want to be a feature film director. The movie wanted to be made. It was like it needed to exist, and it used me.
yeah.
And like, it didn't matter what the hassle was. That was like my purpose, was to make this movie that wanted to be made, and those songs had to be those songs, and the story had to be that story, and it's just the way it was. And I am eternally grateful to have been a part of the movie's coming into being, because obviously it took me on a journey, which, just one part of that was learning how absolutely morally bankrupt copyright is, and lots of other things too. No, it was great. I mean, one way to look at things is it's a hassle. Another way to look at it is it's, a profound change in your life for the better.
What you said is that you were like a vessel, which the film used to get out. Reminds me of what Samuel Beckett said. He said someone criticized his books, and he says it's not like I had a choice but to write them. So he says the things we just.
Yeah, when art's working well, that's what it's like. The thing is, though, that I haven't really been used that way since, and I'm always like, come on, here I am, use me. And it's like, I'm not really being struck by lightning anymore, but I still enjoy making art, so I'm just gonna trudge along.
Was there a difference in acquiring the rights between Sita Sings the Blues and Sadomasochism, or was it the same journey?
Well, I didn't acquire the rights for Sadomasochism. Yeah, the difference was when I set out to make Sadomasochism, even before I knew what I was going to make, I was like, hey, my next project, I'm not getting permission for anything. I'm just going to do whatever I want, whatever moves me, whatever inspires me. Copyright is going to be a zero consideration for this project. And yeah, that's what I did. And nope, no rights. Too bad.
Great. I see that you had several different styles from Sita Sings the Blues, among which Betty Boop I saw a little bit in there. I also saw shadow puppets, which you used. And for me, as someone who was a big fan of Lotte Reiniger, saw a lot of influences in that. Was she an influence in Sita Sings the Blues?
Not a direct influence, no. But all these things are indirect influences.
Yeah.
Because that's how culture works.
Mm-hmm. No, it just struck a chord with me. I found them well, I found them hilarious. By the way, they were really funny to have those them interact and just contradicting each other
Yeah.
in I think really funny way. So
That was an unscripted conversation, and those people had met that day.
oh, that's fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they met at the studio and started talking.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you could really notice it wasn't acting. It just people going back and forth. So it was
Yeah.
yeah, really cool. Um, uh, I also found the film very personal, yet universal, because I think anyone who has had a long-term relationship and had their heart broken can relate to this film. If not to like the story of Sita, to the story of well, maybe your alter ego. um, because it's so personal, is that something that is open source an easier way now for women and minorities to get their voices heard?
Well, I don't think open source is. I think independent is. I mean, not a lot of, but there aren't that many like genuinely independent animation projects being made, but a much larger percent of those are made by women than mainstream, you know, externally funded movies. Unfortunately, most animators I know still don't comprehend free culture or open source. So they make these, independent movies, which means they're super low budget, but they're still not freeing the results, which is too bad because more people would see them if they freed the results. But
Hmm.
they just won't do it, and there's not really anything I can do about that.
Well, yeah, well, having talks like this, for instance, it could help.
It hasn't worked. Like the best thing that's happened is they've stopped yelling at me because when I started with the free culture, they were like, "You're gonna destroy animation, and you're terrible for artists, and you're ruining things for everybody." And they don't do that anymore because they realize that that's not true.
Yeah.
But they're still not like willing to take the plunge themselves.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard because I think there's a conditioning involved. People are afraid that they'll be abused because if you work as an artist, the first thing you'll do is, will you do it for exposure? That's one of the first thing they'll say. And for me, it's like depends who asks. I've been asked to make films for very large corporations, and they said it's going to be good for you. And I'm like, well, you came to me, so you might as well pay me.
Yeah,
uh,
but that's the whole thing. It's like exposure is important. So if you're doing it for exposure, don't do it for a company or somebody else for exposure. Do your own thing for exposure.
exactly. So, and I help friends with films, but companies and people I don't know, yeah, you're gonna have to pay because I do my stuff in my own time, what I want to do.
Yeah. Oh, and to be clear, I pay people. Like when I hire services for my work, of course I pay people. I paid the actors, I paid the composers, I paid the sound designer. Uh, it's like you pay for services, right? You want someone to do something for you, you pay for it. But that's really different than me wanting to do something, wanting to put something out in the world, demanding payment for what I want to do inherently. It's like, no, I
Yeah,
want to do it, and then I ask for donations. But I'm not going to withhold, my song just because somebody's not paying me.
yeah. No, it's the same. We work here at a cultural organization where you pay afterwards,
Nice.
and we're like, okay, we have a play afterwards. You can pay and see what you think it is worth. And I think that's a very positive way of looking at art. Um, and it
Yes,
also,
and I would add. I mean, that's perfect, right? Like, I would love it if everything were like that. If you go to a movie, you pay afterwards. But I don't want to think of it as in terms of what it's worth, because again, there's no real correlation. But just
yeah,
what you feel like contributing.
uh, what something costs is not what it's worth when you
Correct.
look at art. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, are you kind of hinted at it at the beginning of this conversation? We're like, oh, I've done two movies. I don't know if I can do it again. But are you having any? What are your plans for the future? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, one great thing about the pandemic is like for the first time, they're telling you the best thing you can do is just hang out at home. Just stay home.
Yeah,
don't get in anybody's way. Chill out. And I'm like, yeah, I like that. Uh, for me, there's less pressure than ever to be productive, which I really appreciate. Nonetheless, I am having ideas. I've been reading. I would do something about that. Actually, because of my scapegoat experience. So prior to this pandemic, this unprecedented global crisis, the biggest trauma in my life was, being scapegoated and being like having people basically say that I was a horrible witch that hated people and was trying to kill them. That's really traumatic and it leaves scars. And I thought, well, I would like to do something about the scapegoat, the mystery of scapegoating. Like, why do people do it? Why are some people scapegoats over and over again? And I thought, well, the biggest scapegoat myth that we have in the West is the story of Jesus Christ. So I guess I'll read the New Testament finally and see what that's about. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in that, culminating in the Book of Revelation, which I'd never read any of the New Testament before.
okay.
But boy, that Book of Revelation is a real drug trip, like
Yeah.
crazy thing. So I might do something about that.
Okay. Yeah. What you said about drug trip. Well, there are theories that he used certain mushrooms.
That's what I thought right off the bat. I'm like mushrooms.
Yeah.
Mushrooms. But he was also, he also might have been schizophrenic, and it's such a revenge fantasy. I mean, I know that early Christians were persecuted, but wow, what an elaborate revenge fantasy against all the persecutors. And it's also super patriarchal. Like,
Oh yeah.
all those angels and elders, they're just men, and also it, like, to seek and glorify the end of time and the end of the world is like a death wish. And
Well,
that's
yeah. If you believe in an afterlife, it's kind of a new beginning. But
But even that vision of afterlife, like the idea is that the afterlife is going to come to the earth and like all this stuff is just going to end, right? Like life is going to end. And yes, you have like eternal life in the New Jerusalem, but it's still, his vision isn't like what's going to go on there afterwards. It's just the end, and it just makes me think about what's called the death instinct or the death drive by Jung. When I read about script writing when I was starting Sita Sings the Blues, there was this idea that a character has an overt motive and a covert motive. So with Sita, I was thinking, what's her overt motive? Well, she wants to get back with Rama. She wants to be with her man. And then what's her covert motive? Oblivion, right? She wants oblivion. And I think actually that's everybody's covert motive. It's like, what's Jesus's covert motive? Like, of course, his overt motive is, bring the good news and save everybody and stuff like that, but also death.
yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it's a weirdly positive but also strange way to end this. But I kind of agree. Well, it's part of the human experience is the kind of the sadness that you're going to die. That's the human idea, the human philosophy. It's what drives us to get out of bed because we know it's finite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this crisis has only put a big exclamation mark behind that. So
Yeah, actually, you know the picture of the Grim Reaper, like death with a scythe?
yeah,
Until this, I'd always, I never really thought about the scythe. The scythe isn't for getting one person. The scythe is for getting a whole field of wheat.
yeah.
So it's a plague image.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely. That's why you see it. If you look at the Seventh Seal, the film, during the plague in Europe, you see death standing there, and yeah, for me, that's why it's a cinematic masterpiece, because it's such a visual way to let people know, yeah, it's coming, and it's coming for a lot of people. Yeah.
And the seventh seal is out of the book of Revelations. There's the book of
Yes.
seven seals, and the Lamb of God opens all of them. And when the seventh one is open, then the end begins.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's not hope it is now, though. Let us hope for new beginnings. I would like to thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us, and I hope people well, check out your other work. So and yes, well, everyone, that was it. So thank you a lot.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, okay.
Bye.